why did this happen? 171 locations.
Are these opportunities available in 2025? Like, can you do this again?
Yes.
Is there a rinse and repeat story here?
Stuff it. Let's just do 20 years of rezoning in one hit. It had sold for nearly 1.4 million. And that was just wild. Where it's just like, what on earth has happened here?
There doesn't seem to be a scarcity factor anymore, right? It sort of applies everywhere to most houses.
And seeing opportunity where others are not looking. I'm going to tell you a crazy, crazy story about how I made $500,000 2 times on 2 property deals inside a 1-year period. This fundamentally changed my entire property investing journey, and it accelerated my capital position so fast that it completely changed the way I view property investing. This is where the term alpha beta property investing that drives my entire thinking to property investing began from these very deals that were very successful. I'm going to share that story with you, and I've got Adi to talk to me about it. I know it sounds pretty crazy when I say it like that. I'm not here to boast and tell you all about it in a way that's like, hey, look, I can do this. You can't. It's about sharing everything that I know and how I did it so you can do exactly the same. And I'm sharing it particularly right now because an opportunity is available for a similar type of story for one of our listeners out there who are clever enough to go through the process and actually do it themselves. Adi, what do you think, man?
I'm excited, man. You sent me I don't know if you remember, but you sent me screenshots of this, and I saw the dates, and I was like, you bought it for this and you sold it for this, all in the span of, like, what was it, like 9 months or something? It was wild. And I was like, why don't you do that for me, Reedham? And then you were like, fine, I'll do a podcast. I was like, okay, well, that's one way to do it.
So let's dial it up a little bit and go back in time a little bit as to what is actually happening. So this was 4 or 5 years ago. It was the year 2020, just before COVID hit Australian shores. At that time, completely unrelated to COVID and everything going on with price movements and all the changes that were happening here in Australia at the time, the Sydney, New South Wales government was going through planning changes to get more and more duplexes and terraces and townhouses into the middle markets of Sydney. So they were going through this rezoning process, and they did this by having a state-based zoning change that applies to all land in New South Wales if it meets certain criteria. And this would allow certain homes to be from single homes to a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex. This was back in 2020. It first began in 2018, but it got deferred in every single council except 2 councils that I know of at the time. And then it started to come into effect on 1 July 2020. So the reason why I'm telling you all of that detail is because it frames the narrative of how I found this out and how I was able to work it all out. In that time, this planning change that kicked in 2018 applied in 2 councils. What I did, this is absolutely crazy, a wild story where I met somebody who was selling, it was a client actually, he was selling a development that he did. And I meet plenty of clients, we represent lots of developers at Flint, and we go through the numbers. You know the stalking story I said? How I stalk. I was stalking. And then I look through this guy's numbers and I'm like, this is the best development I've ever seen. Like, you bought it for 1.5 and you're selling it for 3? I'm like, what is going on here? Something ain't right here. How did you like double and triple everyone else's return? Let me do my investigating. So then I got the little microscope glass out and started looking at what he was doing. And I worked out that he had used this code that no one else had done, and that's how he got all these returns. This was in the year 2019 before it applied everywhere else. So then I went to an auction of a block of land right next to his one that exhibited the same sort of features. It was a corner block, wide fronted. And at that auction, it had an $800,000 guide. And I thought it would sell for $850 because next door had sold, like right next to it, another 800 square meter block had sold for around $1,000 per square meter. So this one, a little bit better, $800, $850. I went to it, and because everyone had seen his one, it was the craziest auction I'd ever seen. It was so packed. There were literally Lambos, McLarens, fancy cars rocking up. Some guy literally stopped in the middle of the road, parked his car so no car could come in and go out. And it was just like, it was like a car festival.
It's a pandemonium. My God.
Pandemonium at auction. It was a bunch of developers fighting for it, right? Gosh. This $800,000 property which had recently traded as well. It traded the previous year at 780, and they had relisted it. Someone else had relisted it with an $800,000 guide. That's why it was fair. It had sold for nearly 1.4 million, and that was just wild. Where it's just like, what on earth has happened here?
Wait. So let me get this straight. So the price guide. They had bought it for 780. The price guide the next following year was 800.
Yes.
And the Lambo people picked it up for 1.4 million.
There was a Lambo, there was a McLaren, and there was a Ferrari. I don't really remember which.
It was the guy in the Honda Civic, wasn't it?
It could have been. It could have been.
It was me. It was me. I'm the mystery buyer, guys.
Anyway, that was in the year 2019. What I had picked up was information here. This is the point of this story. What did I learn from this? Information is what I got. I got information that, hey, what on earth drove this particular asset to be 30, 40, 50, 60% more than the one next door? Like, why did this happen? This alpha play that I mentioned in other podcasts is where you could find opportunities that are so much better or undervalued to what they should be. This was appropriately valued, and it traded at auction with all these Lambos at its fair price at 1.4 million. It's just everyone had worked it out then. This was in 2019, and it was only one council. I picked this up as information, and the reason why people were doing it is because they were going to use this state-based planning code that was about to apply everywhere.
Wow.
But it only currently applied in this little location, and the LGA right next to it was about to apply on, but they had an exemption for 2 years, a 2-year delay, and that 2-year period is about to be over. And the state government was like, your time's up. Everyone, you need to apply this code. Because I had gathered all that information, I'm just like, well, why don't I just buy all the properties that look like this in this council or in this council or in this council, where it all works. And that is how I bought these properties at such a low price.
Do you want to share the LGAs?
Yeah, so I bought in Liverpool. Yeah, so this was in Fairfield.
Kidding.
This was in Fairfield. And then I had bought in Liverpool. Everyone knows this now. You just go in Liverpool and you look up terrace sites. There's so many of these homes fully built. I did this about a dozen times. I'm talking about 2 deals, but I did it over 10 times on a number of different deals. Now I drive around and I see all these developments where I got the planning approvals for that were initial land plots 4 years later. It's just like, hey, no, those are 4 terraces that we designed and we put together. We put all the bedrooms together and put all the planning permits together for them. It was because of this zoning change that had happened back in 2018, 2019, 2020. It is responding to information. It is reading the codes, being very mindful of the change that is happening, why that change is there, and seeing opportunity where others are not looking. That is the key to finding alpha level returns. And it's a study of information, really. And one thing that I learned in there is in the study of information, a lot of people don't actually follow the information at all. Like, I'm a nerd. Like, I actually thought most property people are nerds, but these Lambo drivers, they ain't nerds. They're just like, I don't look at spreadsheets. I don't look at like computer landcheckers.com and stuff like that. My team does that. I just go in and buy it and be like, can I build a home? That's who I'm competing against. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there with the computer being like, ooh, I can nerd this out. Ooh, let's check it out all out and get all the information that I need and pick up on all that information. So that was kind of where the idea was born.
Wow. That's amazing. So I don't even know where to begin. Gosh. Okay. So you've done this a dozen times. These are the 2 particular deals that you're talking about.
First 2, yeah.
Maybe, probably the question that's on everyone's mind. Are these opportunities available in 2025? Like, can you do this again?
Yes.
Is there a rinse and repeat story here?
Yes. The reason why I'm sharing all of this now is because that same code that was statewide in 2020 that got applied, it got applied to certain zoning lots across New South Wales. You needed an R3 zoned lot, which is kind of like a type of zoning that the council's identified as it should be medium density. So terraces and little apartments should apply there. So they applied the code on that type of lot. Now, fast forward 5 years, we're in the middle of a giant housing crisis where we're not building enough homes, and the state governments and councils is copying a lot of flack, being like, why aren't you building homes? Like, what's going on? Everyone's saying that these planning permits suck. So what they've done just very recently in the last month or 2, and they've been thinking about it for a while, and the information's been out there for a while, but now it's legislated. It applies. You can now get these planning approvals. They've changed it. You don't need it on R3 anymore. In 171 locations all across New South Wales, specific locations, they're allowing this on R2 lots. Now, the reason why that's important to share is almost everything that you look at, the majority of homes that you look at, when you just go for a drive and you're like, check this home out, you can kind of assume if it's got a single home, it's an R2 lot. So if you're in one of these 171 locations, 171 locations, 171, let me say that again. That is basically everywhere. It's like a little, when you look at a little map, it's like a little virus of everywhere, all across Sydney. The state has gone and said, you know what? Stuff it. Let's just do 20 years of rezoning in one hit, being like, let's allow you to do it. You can use this code. We've even reduced it down. You needed 600 square meters. We're like, stuff it. Let's allow it on 500 square meters. There's lots of 500 square meter lots. There's lots of lots between 500 and 600. So let's allow it on 500. Let's start building. Let's get it there. That change has kicked in about a month ago. You know what that means, everyone? You know what that means? It means there is a window of opportunity for you to start looking at similar opportunities like this. And development sites for small developers, that opportunity has been closed for a couple of years now in Sydney, but it's reopened because you can now buy land at a good enough price where you can build enough homes on, and the numbers make sense again. Where it's just like, I could put 2, now I could put 4. You know, I don't want to put 2 because it's not feasible, but when I put 4, it is feasible. So the numbers look different again, and the opportunity is there again.
So I'm really curious about this. Right, I've quite a few questions going through my head. So there's 171 locations where the zoning change applies.
Yes.
They're now R2 zoned.
Yes.
R2 specific, which is majority of properties, right? So there doesn't seem to be a scarcity factor anymore, right? It sort of applies everywhere to most houses. Is the level of opportunity that you had 4 years ago, 5 years ago, being so specific, like R3 zoned, very specific areas, is the level of opportunity just as big, do you believe? Do you think the returns, most people want to know.
It's better, actually.
Okay.
It's just higher budget now. Those 171 areas could apply in the eastern suburbs, for example, across the inner north, the inner west, Strathfield. All these like nice pockets of Sydney are now available to use this code. Typically, you couldn't buy an R3 property in these areas because they would be apartment sites, or you wouldn't be able to, it'll cost too much. Mm-hmm. And there's not that many of them. But there are a lot of R2 sites in these areas. So there's a lot more opportunities available, and the numbers make better sense now because of higher building costs in more premium areas. So the opportunity is very much available. Is it scarce? Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to find. I had to look. I was doing a little video of this on our YouTube channel and trying to find properties. And I'm like, oh crap, like this is taking me half an hour and I found 2 opportunities across Sydney where it works. So it's not easy to find, and you got to know what you're doing. And there's a million checks to go through and checks and balances, which I'll go through. I'll go through the step-by-step for you to work out exactly how to do it. That process takes, it's not, there's so many opportunities. Mm-hmm. There are some, it's scarce, but the opportunity window is there again. It's available.
Amazing. Let me ask you something. So this zoning allows you to effectively go in, do some planning. The whole intention of this, improve the housing crisis, right? Like it's just there's not enough houses.
Solve a big problem while you're at it, man.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have these blocks of land in quite established areas. Strathfield's a really nice place, quite close to where my partner lives. You can build apartment blocks there. A thought that popped into my head is, in a future where apartment blocks have come up, are we talking about potential price stagnation in a lot of these suburbs because there's over time there is a supply issue now? So
100%.
Is the opportunity in these markets more around the development opportunity, or is it more, do you see the buy and hold in these sort of places also having opportunity? Because for me it's a buy and hold. I have been a big fan of that for a long time. So in these markets, how would you sort of frame that? I
mean, the markets are so expensive and the yields are so crap that they're not typically a buy and hold investor play for most people at the moment, right? Yeah. Like you're sitting at 2.5%, 3.5% yields, and these assets aren't nice-ish homes to live in, so the yield is pretty low. Mm-hmm. So buy and hold is a little bit of an ugly play in general in Sydney at the moment. You're not seeing too many investors being like, I just want to park some money here in this location. It's not the greatest opportunity of today.
Sure.
That's been the case for the last 3 or 4 years as well. Sure. And I don't think there's a buy and hold compelling reason of just throwing a dart on a map, go and buy in Sydney. This is a play at finding undervalued property investments. That's what I'd call it. It looks like a house. Acts like it will serve as a house. You'll rent it out to somebody else. It's just a property investment. And I feel like I've seen a couple contract of sales of owner occupiers in our Flint Invest business recently in the last month or two. And then I've looked at the frameworks and I've done the homework. I'm like, someone's been listening. Someone's been listening. A couple of those, like ones that I've seen one, I think it's in the North Ryde sort of pocket recently, and it was corner block. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's a triplex site or a quadplex site. Be like,
Wow.
you've bought this as an owner occupier. It's a really, really good opportunity where it's just like, hey, I can buy a quadplex site. I don't want to develop it. It's a nice home. I'll go live in it. But at the same time, I'm buying at 2 million. And when I do these plans, it's probably worth 2.6. If I can run the numbers and do the steps that I go through, then that's a good opportunity, right? So you're buying a little bit of like a value mismatch, which is kind of exactly what I've been investing in, value mismatches where pricing's incorrect. And I talked about it in Darwin. I talked about Darwin as being a little bit of a value mismatch for a very different reason. It's not associated with planning change, but it's associated with undervaluing what has happened over a period of time. And there's the price should be here, but it's actually here. And that will just kind of reach equilibrium over time. That's what's happening in Townsville. That's what happened in Perth. Like you see prices too low for where they should be, and then prices just correct itself. That's why you have rapid price growth. So it's just kind of getting to where it needs to be.
Amazing.
Sydney itself isn't like this, tilted this way, but there are some assets in Sydney that are a little bit like this.
Amazing. So let's talk about budgets, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's a very broad question. There's 171 locations. You know, you're talking about probably $10 million sites and $2 million sites. What are we talking about? Is this sort of like, what are we talking
Starting $1 million. Let's just
Starting
say.
$1 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything below $1 million, you're like, this doesn't work anymore. So
Okay,
it's
gotcha.
$1 million plus budget.
Cool.
$2 million, even better. And it gets better and better as you go
Perfect.
further. But you're looking at $1 million as a minimum for opportunities like this, which, rules most property investors out as well with low borrowing powers, high interest rates, low yields, big cash flow crunches. It rules most people out. So it is a pay to play sort of game. And once you've done a couple of these, you obviously get more and more comfortable with it, and you kind of be able to identify it. Maybe I'll go through the steps as
Yes,
well.
please.
actually.
Yeah.
So-
Can we go through the framework? Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
so-
learning, by the way, guys. I'm going to steal all of this after this. This is good.
I'm convinced to buy it down, and I was like, hang on.
There's 171 locations in Sydney.
Oh man, what are we doing, Artie? What are we
What are we
doing? A little side anecdote. Artie and I are getting used to this crazy, crazy life that we have at the moment. Like I was telling Artie, I've been stopped about 4 times in the last week in the lifts and freaking walking around. It's freaking weird. It's getting really, really weird. And I know you're getting the same sort of heat. So
My dad's very proud. My dad,
Is
a couple
he?
of people at my dad's gym recognized.
my mum's been watching for a
Chanda.
while. Hi, mum. Love you.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Ma.
So that is crazy. But I'm starting to understand the level of like the viewership and listening that's going on and some of the influence that happens from the things that we say. So again, let me reiterate, this is just sharing information. I'm not telling you to go and do this. I'm just saying that I did this. It's how my investing has worked in the past. And ultimately, we'll talk about this in a different episode. Ultimately, it helped me get to my end goal. My end goal for a long time was to buy my own home and to afford it and to not have a big debt against it, to give me the freedoms that I wanted in life. And my wife happens to grow up in a very expensive part of Sydney, and I wanted to live where she wanted to live, so I needed to get creative. This was me getting creative and using property as a vehicle to do it. And it's me sharing a different lens of doing it. And it also taught me the hallmarks of alpha beta, and now it's applying the same hallmarks, different areas, and reapplying the same strategy and the brains attached to it. And the whole process of understanding property, why these value mismatches happen, is how I view it. And then it's applying that across a national sense to work out where these value mismatches are and why. That's driving the research at Alaya Property. So it's some of these deals, the learnings from it, the lessons from it is driving the framework of thinking. So let's start with step number one. If I'm starting from scratch, you need to understand the code. Like you need to understand what is this state-based planning change. So you can go on the New South Wales government's website. It's called the Low Rise Medium Density Code. There's a design guide in there. You can go to terraces and dual occupancies, but probably the terraces, and read it. It'll tell you the setbacks that you need to have, the widths of the land that you need to have, and what typical houses look like and terraces look like. That's just a little bit of research paper. Better yet, download it. Go into ChatGPT, prompt it, and be like, hey, can you read this document for me and tell me what do I need for terrace site? And it'll probably sum it up a little bit for you in a much quicker way as to what you're looking for. Then go into Liverpool Council. Specifically, I'll give you a bunch of suburbs to make it easier. Moorebank, Wattle Grove, Casula, and look up townhouses and terraces there. And see anything that's 3 years old, see anything that's 3 or 4 years old, and you'll see all these terraces that have just popped up being like, cool. Then go on the DA tracker on those websites and see how people got these.
DA for the listeners?
So like development approval tracker on the website. So Google development approval tracker, Liverpool Council, find a property investment that has a terrace or townhouse on it, and then check it out. Find the address and then check it out on the Liverpool Council website, and it will show you whether someone got a DA or a CDC on it. If it's a CDC approval, so a DA is a development application that goes to council, and a CDC is an application that gets approved by a private certifier. Anyone who uses this code would be getting approvals through a private certifier, which makes it much, much faster, much, much safer, much, much quicker. And that speed is part of the return that you get. And it gives you clarity. So
makes sense.
That's how you find it. Now you've got a live example of what it looks like. You can now see, cool, I've kind of worked out that I need a corner property or really wide property, because to get terraces, you need width. You can't fit 3 terraces inside a 12-meter lot width. It's too narrow, so you need width. Corner properties all have width. If you buy a corner property, you need some depth as well. Like it can't be a corner property with no depth, because with setbacks there, it just doesn't work. You can't draw a building footprint. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to draw out my building. I'm buying a plot of land, being like, what sort of building can I put on this? That's what I'm actually trying to do here. After you do this for so long, I've been doing this for years, I can kind of look at a site and almost draw it up in my head now, because I've done so many of them. It's just, it'll look the same as the other one that I just drew up there. So if you, for example, have a 24-meter wide property that's square, you can probably be like, I can fit 4 terraces in there. They'll be 6 meters wide each. And, they'll be deep. They'll probably have a little cutout in the middle, and they'll look like a duplex. It'll be like a 4-bedroom duplex. I know that's what it'll look like. You might need to do a little bit of work to work out exactly what's there. So that's how you do the work. You find others. Just copy, basically. You find what other people are doing, what others have done, and you'll be able to draw it out, because you'll see a live building that's already been done under the same code. That's probably the starting point. And then you go on the LMR viewer map, which is the low to medium rise, the 171 locations. There's a map on New South Wales Council's, on the New South Wales State Government's website. There's a map there that'll show you the spread like virus. We're like 171 locations. You'll see all these yellow things. It literally looks like a virus. It looks like COVID has taken over Sydney, being like, rah, I've taken over, right? That rah, I've taken over is all areas that you can potentially put this zoning map on. So that's my starting point as to working it out. Now you've worked out what to do, what it looks like. You worked out where to do it. What I do is I open up realestate.com and domain.com next to this map and be like, hey, look, what can I find that corresponds to the two? Ideally, AI could do this better. This is a bit manual, but like it's not that hard. So you can draw it up and be like, now you start looking for properties that fit. That's the starting point to finding a property that works. If you go through my WhatsApp, I probably have one right now, actually. Like, what's the time? I haven't looked at my phone for a few hours now. If I go to my WhatsApp, I reckon I'll find a message being like, hey, bro, what do you think about this one? It's just like, so people are doing this work behind the scenes. So one of our clients will listen to this and be like, hey, what do you think of this one? That's what they're doing. This is how they do it. And you can find opportunities like that. That's a starting point, at least.
Very interesting, Red. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was, okay. So I understood the first couple. What else are we going deeper to really sort of identify, whether this makes sense for me, or whether, what kind of, walk us through what the rest of the steps look like.
For sure. So that's the starting point as to like, you found potential, how do you find these opportunities? Now that you find it, let's just say you found a property that you think works, you need to do a lot more work. You don't just go buy it, but like, okay, there's a whole range of additional steps there. I call it my due diligence checklist. So we have a due diligence checklist that we run through for every development site, and we run through, is there any flooding issues, bushfire issues? Are there freaking helicopter, airplane noises issues there? Liverpool Council has some of that. So go through a full detailed due diligence checklist, check the planning certificate, look at the contracts, go through the property sourcing process and the detailed checks there. That takes a fair bit of time if you don't know what you're doing, because you're going to have to check each of these. Like, how do I check if it's flooded? So that you get with a little bit of experience, you kind of work out exactly how to do that. And then the next point, once you've done all that, I call that the contract review process. You got to run the numbers.
Yeah.
Does it actually make any sense at all? Like, you got to see whether the numbers make sense. Now, if you are operating at $1 million plus budget, if you're operating below that, then the numbers won't make sense. So you just be like, stuff it. Like, this opportunity doesn't suit me that much. But if you're operating beyond that budget and you're looking for an investment property and you want to take advantage of this opportunity, then you're starting to be like, the numbers are starting to work again. That was my starting point. Being like, the numbers are starting to work again. It hasn't worked for years, but the numbers are starting to work for the right properties. There's going to be a lot of stories like this. By this time next year, I'm going to be able to show you 10 examples. I'll find 10 examples of like, wow, this property was $2 million and now it's selling for 3. But Sydney hasn't risen at all. But why did this rise 50%?
Purely because of coding changes. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be able to find at least 10 examples of that change. Maybe they wouldn't have traded. So like maybe they haven't sold now and then resold. Like maybe there's not too many examples of that. That's harder to find. But will I be able to show you 10 examples that would be like, you'll just see it everywhere where you just go on real estate domain and be like, look, planning approvals. It will look like everything I've sold. Basically, it'll be like a nice little picture of a dream home that doesn't actually exist, carved out pieces of land. It'll be like, oh, this is weird. Like, but you'll see them everywhere. You'll see a lot of Lambos and Ferraris and cars like that at the auctions, being like, yeah, I'll build this. I'll build this. You'll see a lot of that. That's the process there because the numbers make sense. So you need to be able to run a feasibility on whether this is attractive for you. And also, when you sell it, is it attractive for the person that drives the Lambo that's going to buy it from you? They drive a Lambo for a reason because they make money. They need to be making money from buying it from you. So you need to make sure that they can fuel their next car purchase. Be like, they're gonna be able to upgrade their Lambo, right? Like you got to be able to do the numbers for you and for them because that's who you're selling to.
Okay, so can we just delve into the numbers a little bit? So you said it's $1 million plus budget.
Yes.
If you have a $2 million budget, even better.
Yes.
But then there's obviously quite a few costs that you incur beyond just purchasing the land, right? There's the planning and all that kind of stuff. So how do you, what is that due diligence at a very high level? What is that checklist? So you've gone through the due diligence. Yep, it ticks all the boxes. Yep. Now I'm trying to work out if my numbers work for me.
Yes.
How do I make sure that I buy it at the right price, sell it at the right price so the developer with the Lambo gets his returns as well or her returns as well as part of this? What does that little bit look like? What are we looking at?
It's probably a level of experience that I have here that makes it a bit simpler for me. So you run a development feasibility. Okay. Imagine you're buying a plot of land and you've got the planning approvals. Like you've done step 1 and step 2, so you know what it looks like. You're like, I could get 4 on this. You work out what those 4 will sell for. That's your income that you get. Gotcha. So let's just say you bought a plot of land there for $2 million and you're going to be building 4 homes on it. You can see that that's what my approval is going to be. And I'm going to sell each of them for $2 million, each home that's there. That means that your income is going to be $8 million through that process. So you add that to your top line. This is my income. Take away GST and other costs in there. And then be like, how much is it going to cost me to actually do this development? Sure. You go through that process. You add in the build cost. The build cost of that, call it $2.5 million.
And what are you doing here? Are you calling builders and getting some ideas? Or?
Yeah, this is probably where experience comes in. I've seen a lot of build contracts. Well, obviously run Flint Invest. We have a lot of developers. I've seen a lot of contracts. I call builders. I find some information to work it out. But really high-level frameworks are okay. You can use the Q. You can use a quantity surveyor's cost report. You can ask ChatGPT. It's probably going to give you the wrong answer. But really, really roughly, it'll cost $750,000 to build one half of a duplex. Okay. So if I'm building 4, that probably cost me $3 million. I've said 2.5 here because I'm building 4. I could probably get a $100K discount across the board. Maybe it's smaller than a duplex because you're getting 4, so they're not going to be as big as a duplex. So they're a bit smaller. Call it $2.5 million to build 4 in this example. So $8 million for the income that I'm going to get, $2.5 million for the build. Put in your interest costs, your DA costs, your planning costs, all the costs that you'll incur in a development. So interest is the one that most people get wrong. So make sure you put interest in there because money has a cost. Planning approvals, etc. You can go detailed into it. Like I would just put $50,000 as a rough guide. It always cost me between $40,000 and $60,000 to get the planning approvals for this. There's some council costs and other costs that you have to put in. Put all that in there, but the main one's going to be the build, and then work out how much profit is there left over. Yeah. Now, if you see the profit margin being ridiculously high, more than 10%, like there's millions of dollars to be made here, then you're like, this land isn't worth $2 million. Like, and in this example that I've just put, like build cost $2.5 million, land I bought for $2 million, that's $4.5 million, plus let's just call it $500,000 for everything else, like interest, everything. That's $5 million. But you're getting $8 million in income. That's a 60% return. Like, no, like every Lambo owner is going to be like, I want that. If you're selling that to me $2 million, I'll take it. Like, everyone's going to take it. I'm going to make a couple $1 million doing this. All I have to do is build 4 homes that are already approved, no risk. I'll have it done in a year. So that land isn't worth $2 million anymore. It's worth $3.5 million or something like that because the numbers, the way it looks is it's attractive for you. Then you need to run the numbers as to what will it look like for the guy buying it off me. Right. Change the land price. get rid of the planning approval cost, change the interest around because they don't need to pay the planning approval cost because you've already done it for them. Be like, cool. This person needs to make, say, 10 or 15% on their return. So put it in your spreadsheets, run the numbers, and be like, cool, what is the land value now? Right. If that land value is significantly more than what you paid for it, that is the opportunity. That is the spread that's there. When you get really good at this, I know exactly what I'm going to sell my house for before I bought it.
Right.
That is the level of sophistication you can get to. When I bought these properties, I thought I was selling for, I'm not going to lie, I thought I was selling between 1.3 to 1.4. That was the price point that I was going at. When I had bought it, it was around 1.2, but the market had moved in that few months. So there was some improvement there. I was buying at 725 or something like that in this example, and 800. And I was like, my numbers say I'm selling for 1.2. It was a 50% increase. It ended up being a little bit more because Sydney's property market had risen 10% during that time period, and that improved the feasibility. That's the beta component to all of this, being like, can you buy it in a rising market too?
Yep.
And this is what I like about Sydney and Melbourne, because it hasn't done well for 3 or 4 years. The beta component is pretty good. I'm not that worried about Sydney house prices moving backwards over the next few years. That risk has kind of gone away. Same in Melbourne. It hasn't done well for a number of years. So the beta component is really good, and the alpha opportunity is here. This isn't just the Sydney play as well. Melbourne's got the same opportunity.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
gosh, okay. Is there anything else you want to run us through in terms of the framework? So that makes sense. Okay, so what do the next steps look like? So are we going out there, sort of going on realestate.com and starting to look for places? Is that? I mean, I know that's what you do. You don't really have a life outside of this podcast. Your little girls and realestate.com.
Yeah. I'm chatting to you, are you?
That's true. Yeah, on the podcast. But outside of this, you're going to go straight to realestate.com after this.
Yes.
So how do you find these opportunities? What are we doing here? So are we sort of just calling real estate agents? Be like, hey.
Same way as you source at Alaya, if that makes sense. If you know what you're looking for, I've got creative and sophisticated with it in certain cases. Right now, you don't need to do this because there's so many opportunities everywhere that are going to pop up. But you can get sophisticated with this. You can start off-market sourcing. Like, how does Alaya off-market source?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do?
Relationship building with
Pick up the
agents,
phone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is easier to off-market source. This is easier because I can give the agent the list. I wanted to. Be like, find me these properties. This is the framework. This is what I'm looking for. Very, very specifically. If you find it, give me a call before anyone else. I'll make you an unconditional offer very, very quickly, and it'll all be wrapped up. And the person selling it doesn't have to worry about making the house look good, styling it, packing their stuff up. They're not going to have anyone walk through because I don't care. Like, it's just done very easily and quickly for them. There's plenty of sellers out there that'll be like, wish I could sell my home like this because I hate the process of selling my home. I sold my home. I sold my family home last year. It sucked.
Yeah.
Like, I've got little kids. I had to style it. People kept coming through the house. Like, some didn't take, like, I like when people take the shoes off in my house, but like, no, they don't take. It sucked. I was just like, get out of my house. That's what I was thinking.
But also buy it, but get out.
Just look,
buy it for a premium.
Look at a computer. Don't come in. Come on. Like, it's
stand outside. It's got a nice porch there.
Yeah. Mainly because I had little kids who like to paint, put their hands on the wall with cream and paint, and I had to keep it all neat. Like, a lot of people don't want to sell their house like that. That's why off-market campaigns work really, really well because vendors want that. So that's how I'd go about finding it. You either find it there or find opportunities. This is one of many opportunities that Sydney development opportunities have popped up. You're going to see this across the board because planning changes are rife at the moment in Sydney, big changes, and I was able to execute it on our side. These are the new housing rules. Curtis and I have done a podcast on these rules and the opportunities that are there. I've now, in this podcast, gone very specific about how I used it to buy a property for $725, sell it for $1.35. There's another YouTube video out now that literally showcases step by step of how I've done it, and we've gone through it here. Hopefully that gives you the full framework of exactly how to do this.
Dude, that's absolutely wild. So we've talked about Sydney, we've talked about Melbourne. There are more expensive markets. I want to put you on the spot here. I don't know if you know the answer to this. Are there more affordable capital cities that you know of? Like, I mean, Perth is obviously more expensive than it was 3-4 years ago.
Yes.
Do you know if there are, because Perth in itself has a massive housing crisis, right? There's just not enough homes being built. Yep. And Adelaide, right?
Yes.
Adelaide's become completely unaffordable, right? I think you said at one stage it was one of the most unaffordable cities in the world. Right?
It is. San Fran.
Then San Fran, which is absolutely crazy. Do you know of any upcoming changes like this that allows the same level of opportunity in some of these other more affordable states where the budget doesn't need to be $2 million?
It's harder. The numbers just don't work because build costs are so high. It costs $600,000 to build a townhouse now or a terrace type home. When I say that, anyone listening, it's kind of like a house. It's quite large. It's 180 square meters internally. It costs 600 grand to build that. That costs so much money. In some areas, they don't even sell for 600 grand. So like the numbers don't work. If you're paying money for the land, the feasibility just doesn't work. There's no money to be made there. It works in more expensive areas now because it costs so much money to build a home. You can find a way to like, get those robots to build this home really, really quickly or like, get those 3D printers to be like, go, I print myself a home like in Sims. If you can find a way to do that really, really cheap, then these lands will be extremely valuable. And if that does happen in the future, then you're going to be sitting on like a pretty penny because you sit on the land that you could do that with.
Gotcha.
So there's a high level summary, Adi. I think that covers it. Full summary of this particular opportunity and something that exists at the moment. And if you're looking to invest at the moment, and looking for a development opportunity for an alpha beta play, this window has reopened 5 years after I first did it. It was closed for a number of years, but it is now reopened. If you do your research, follow these steps, you've got a chance at investing like this.